For those of you that have been asking what happened with that Eleanor Mustang from just a few weeks ago, here we are. She's up and running again. Our customer that spent $135,000 on a Nightmare Mustang, actually $12,000 later has a car that he can take home, drive, and enjoy. He had the opportunity to try to pursue legal action and maybe sue the seller, but all he wanted was an Eleanor type Mustang. She's a sexy looking car, so we decided we'd just fix it, and here we go. I'll pull it up on the rack and we can take a look at what's going on underneath and what we've done so far. Words of wisdom, don't let this happen to you. Check out the link below and you can download our free buyer's guide and inspection report and even join our community so that you make sure that you're not stuck in the shoes that this guy's in. Always make sure you inspect the car, buyer beware, do your homework, know what you're looking for. Make sure if you're gonna buy a car, do it once and do it right. As many of you may recall, this Eleanor Mustang came in for a myriad of reasons. We didn't really realize how bad it was when it first came in. It came in because the drive shaft fell out. So I'll walk you under and show you a bunch of what happened. Underneath, the biggest thing, the major problem we had was the rear end had absolutely no fluid in it. It was all rebuilt, it appeared, but nobody bothered to put any fluid in it. So the front of the yoke completely broke off. So the whole pinion snapped off and dropped the drive shaft and threw it on the ground. So we rebuilt the rear end, put new ring and pinion gears in it, serviced the posi with new clutches, new yoke, and had the drive shaft balanced with new U-joints. So now we're good back here. The other biggest problem we had on the face was that the transmission was also broken. So what had happened is whoever was initially working on the car tried to install the transmission and didn't get the input shaft all the way into the crankshaft. And so they didn't have the transmission in straight, and they made the mistake of trying to tighten the 4 bolts and suck the transmission in to the bell housing. And as a result, they had broken off a couple ears, stripped a number of bolts. So it's a Tremec TKO, and it had to be completely rebuilt and recased. Also, we had to tap some holes in the bell housing, and lo and behold, when we took it apart, the person, when they put the clutch on, they missed the dowel pins and they had talcoed the pressure plate. So we had to do a clutch, we had to do a transmission, we had to do a drive shaft redo, and then if you recall, we had a transmission cross member that was jerry-rigged and welded in place. So we were able to get this kit from American Powertrain, and it's got an adjustable bracket, and so now we've got a transmission that's in securely and also is removable. We also didn't have any e-brake whatsoever, which could have been a problem because we had a bunch of braking issues on this car. I'll walk through some of the braking issues. The master cylinder was about to fall off. The rear lines were pinched and leaking. And so we had no e-brake, which was super dangerous. So now we have a parking brake, which a lot of us can use as an e-brake in an emergency. I know it's a parking brake. But so we were able to configure, we got all the linkages here, got the primary cable, got all the missing components, and then fabricated our own cables to work because it's got a rear disc brake setup off like a Ford Explorer. So we built cables and got all that working, so now we have a functional parking brake. Also, we'll go to the rear of the car real quick and I can show you a few more things. Speaking of brakes, I showed before how all of these lines were completely coiled up because somebody had bought too long of a line, didn't know how to flare lines and do their own fittings. So we wound up taking all of that stuff off. We replaced the upper line that was already pinched with a steel braided quality flex line, and then we built brand new brake lines from the flex line out to the caliper hoses. So now we've got new brake lines here. Additionally, you can see as we walk up the middle of the car, I had showed before that this line had been hit and pinched when the drive shaft came out and it was flopping around with baling wire. So we built a whole new line all the way from the rear to the front. Every brake line on this car wound up getting rebuilt. We did the brake lines right here up from the calipers to the frame. We redid the brake line all the way across the frame, and we did the brake line across here. So every single brake line wound up having to be changed on this car as well. In addition to the brake line, I showed you last time how the fuel line was completely pinched everywhere. So we had to do a new fuel line front to rear as well. So we did a nice 3/8 line. This car has frame connectors, so since it had frame connectors, we just built a new line and secured it here up all the way to the rear and got it to the fuel tank and the fuel sending unit properly. The previous one was going under the brake line, over the leaf spring, and was super, super dangerous. In addition to that, The frame connectors were barely welded in, so we went ahead and continued cleaning up. We actually cut the welds and then slid the frame connector all the way up and got them in nice and tight and welded them in the rear and then also in the front. So now we've got frame connectors that are properly installed, a rear end, a drive shaft, a transmission that works. We're almost ready to drive the car, but we still had front end problems. So let's look at what we did there. In the previous video, I showed you that the brake rotor was completely smoked on this side. It was all gouged and chewed up because this caliper had come loose or had never been tightened properly. So we tightened the caliper, got that fixed, had the rotor turned and did brand new bearings in there. The lower control arms were wasted, so we did lower control arms. We also added an upgraded sway bar while we're in here so it can handle a bunch better. Fixed the wasted tie rod ends that were here. One of these was bad, and then did a new idler arm. So in addition to that on the front end, we also did polyurethane strut rod bushings. And so now this car is alignable, is safe to drive, and will track straight. Although we're mostly done with this car, there still are a few things that we still want to resolve. It still has this cheesy lower radiator hose that I really worry about. It's so close to the balancer. So that's on our list to do. We got rid of the hokey. Oh, we didn't. We were going to get rid of the hokey engine chain, so that'll still come off. And then we fixed a number of leaks here. So we're getting closer to where the customer can finally take this car home and enjoy it. A couple more things and we'll probably be there. $135,000 car was a nightmare. $12,000 more is about where we sit, so about $147,000. He's finally going to have a car that he can enjoy and drive. So now we take you under the hood of the Eleanor. In the last video, again, we fired up the engine. There was some concern as to if it was going to be a good runner. It does feel like it runs strong, it runs smooth. It's running on all 8 cylinders. And you know what? It does have pretty good power. I'd say it's a 450 horse small block. It's a 302 based. We're guessing it's a 347, but I haven't been able to prove or disprove that as of yet. It does have aluminum heads, a nice Performer RPM air gap, a big Holly, and a decent ignition system. So the engine does run well. So thank God there was something here that we could work with. In the other video, I showed you how this coil was just hanging on by a hose clamp right here. And for some reason, which was really weird to me, they had the oil pressure sending unit that goes in the side of the block. It was up here, mounted also on a super sexy hose clamp. And then they had built this extension to go from the side of the engine with an adapter and a fitting, and then a nylon hose that, mind you, was sitting against the header ready to melt, coming up here to the pressure sending unit. I don't know why they had to do all of this. All I did is take a couple of the fittings that came with this hokey menagerie, and then I simply threaded them into the block, and I got the oil sending unit down below by the oil filter, nice and clean like it should be. So we solved a leak there, we solved a potential big leak issue, and we cleaned this area up. I couldn't resist. I talked about how ugly the silver loom was, so we at least put a black loom on those wires there. We still see that we've got a little bit of a coolant leak, so as we get into our drive tests, we're going to work on this and see if we can figure out. Temp seems fine, but we've got a little bit of leak there. Valve covers were hideously loose and leaking. We wound up adding a nice breather and a PCV valve over here. What happens when you don't have a positive PCV system, which is a positive crankcase ventilation system, we need to have air sucking in to the throttle body or the carburetor, out of the valve cover, and then a vent going back in. What that does is it relieves those internal engine pressures and helps the car not push gaskets out and blow oil out and blow seals. So now we've got a good PCV system that's functional. We tightened up. The alternator was totally loose. It was walking off, so we tightened that. We talked about the battery cable that was a total generic end, kind of like this red one has, just your crimp end here. Like a generic kind of repair terminal. That one's actually in good shape, but this one was hideous. So what we did is we soldered our own quality battery cable end on there and got everything cleaned up there. So now we've got a charging system that works, an engine that works, a transmission that works, and brakes that work. So brake-wise, in the previous video, I could shake this master cylinder so hard that it would probably move about like that. Wondered why the pedal felt so bad. Well, what they had done is they put the bolt going through the firewall and they didn't have any kind of a washer on the inside of the firewall, and so the nut was trying to pull through an exploded, blown out hole. We simply took the master cylinder off, flattened the firewall. We wound up building an adapter plate and putting that on there, so when we tightened it down, we had a nice solid footprint, tightened our nuts down, our bolts, and the master cylinder is nice and secure. We had to build all new brake lines, as I said, across, up, down, and around. We even had to redo the lines up here at the master cylinder. Whoever put this car together and sold it to this guy did not know how to flare a brake line. They had stainless lines that had split when they were trying to flare them. Tip to you guys, stainless lines are neat, but they're such a pain to work with. They'll break quality tools, so I give the guy a pass on that. Stainless is hard to flare. Try to go with regular steel if you can. But he also had steel lines that were totally wallered out, and then there was even a brass line that had like a metric double bubble flare. Everything was just hodgepodge. I do definitely think there were some external forces at work. Whoever was working on this car was up late at night, maybe for a few nights, if you know what I'm saying. Now that we've cleaned up most of the handiwork of the previous mechanic or mechanics or whatever they were, wires are tucked away, everything's kind of ready to go, so let's fire it up and take a listen. We've still got a couple things to do. I've got a little bit of a header leak, and I'll show you why, because they don't even have the right header bolts in there, but that's a problem for later today. Right now, we're running and we're driving, so we're just trying to QC everything down. Now that the car runs, we're almost there. He's not really interested or worried about a lot of the fit and finish on the interior. That'll be round 2 for him. Round 1 was just get the car up, running, and driving. So right now we've got signals that work, lights that work, but we still have weird things. Like I tried to drive it earlier and I can't reach the turn signal. I don't know why it's so short. That's very strange. We did get the e-brake working nice and tight, so that's nice. Clutch works. Brakes are nice and firm. So we'll put this boot on because I think some of you remember that this was my shift boot, so that's gonna go away. We'll get a new shift boot in here. We'll attach the mirror. And hopefully that's gonna be it. That's a rundown of what we had to do round 1.1 to the Eleanor Mustang to get it back on the road. Just beware, when you buy a car, look it over, have somebody that knows what they're doing, look it over. Don't be stuck in a situation that this guy was. He dropped 135 grand on what he thought was gonna be an amazing car. Now it's starting to be a nice car, but had he known these things, he would have whittled the guy down on the price, or he would have walked away and bought a different car. Don't let this be you. Check out and join our shop community, a place where people can come together, talk about cars, share experiences, and where I'm downloading a ton of information where you guys can go to look, to learn what to look for and what not to accept when you're buying a classic car.